Hello, everyone. It's a couple of minutes after 6 o'clock, and we're ready to get started. My name is Cynthia Hardy, and I have the pleasure of serving as the moderator for today's workshop. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications here at Columbia Housing, and we certainly hope everyone is doing well this evening. There's so many of us here today. As I mentioned, I'm going to be moderating this evening, and this is our Looking for Landlords recruitment workshop. I am honored to participate in today's important workshop for a number of reasons. I'm also very delighted to just simply welcome you all to this forum. We know that you all have a lot of questions and we intend to answer them. We'll be using the chat feature to ask you, ask you to list your questions, and we will answer them in the Q&A portion of today's workshop. Now, before we get the workshop underway, we would appreciate your participation in an interactive one-question survey that's going to better help us target our messaging for today. And so it will appear on the screen. You just use your cursor to hover over it. The bubbles will pop up, and you just click the one that best describes you. And so we will be able to use that information. More than 200 people registered today, so it'll be very good for us to get a good feel for our audience so that we can make sure that we're targeting the messaging to you properly. And we'll be able to get those responses from you and get them tallied in real time so we can use them. I'll go ahead with some of our housekeeping notes for now. Again, welcome to our recruitment workshop. Today's session should last up to 90 minutes. We might get wrapped up a little bit early, but we do have an hour and a half that is set aside for today's workshop. We're also recording today's presentation so that you and others can watch it later. Following the workshop, we will publish a summary of today's Q&A, the questions and answers. And so we want you to use that chat box, fill it up. Let us know the questions that you would like for us to answer after the presentation. We're going to respectfully ask everyone if you would please mute yourself if you are not speaking, because we can hear what you say if you're not muted. So you want to go ahead and do that. I also want to let you know that today's order of presentation is as follows. Our overview will be presented by our Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director, Ivory Matthews. She'll go over very pertinent information at that time. After Mrs. Matthews, then our Chief Operating Officer, Yvonne Bean, will talk about the important relationship between Columbia Housing and its landlords. Mrs. Bean will introduce our Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Candace Tollison, and she will, of course, do the workshop presentation. Now, it's following Candace Tollison's presentation that we will be fielding questions. So if you have questions, please list those questions in the chat at the bottom of the screen. If you just hover over that area, you'll be able to see the chat bubble. Click on it, and it'll give you some pretty good directions if you're not familiar with it already.
Cynthia, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matthews. For the whole time?
No, we missed probably the last 30 seconds of what you said.
Okay, all right. I
Or
didn't.
maybe not, maybe last 15 seconds.
Okay, let me start over. You guys got that part about the chat box, right? And putting your questions there?
Okay. I did not get the last two when she mentioned unmute.
All right.
Catch that. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Let me just go over the order of the presentation and then just kind of start there. Our overview is going to be presented by our COO and Executive Director. That's Ivory Matthews. And then after Mrs. Matthews, our Chief Operating Officer, our COO, Yvonne Bean, will talk about the important relationship between Columbia Housing and its landlords. After Mrs. Bean, she's going to introduce the Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and that Vice President is Candace Tollison. She will handle the workshop portion of the presentation. Following Candace's presentation, that's when we'll have the Q&A. So I want to direct you all to that chat box so that you can fill it up with your questions, because we want to hear all the questions and we want to field the ones that we can this evening. And as I mentioned in the intro, we have a summary of the Q&A that we will publish and send to you a few days after. I'll be talking to Lee McRoberts later in the presentation once we get a feel for how many questions, but we will provide that to you so that you'll leave with the information that you need. At this time, I'm going to introduce our CEO, Ivory Matthews. You guys probably remember when Mrs. Matthews took over as the interim executive director in July of 2019. Well, then in July of 2020, Mrs. Matthews accepted the permanent position as chief executive officer and executive director of the Columbia and Casey Housing Authorities. She has more than 20 years of experience working for housing authorities and in the affordable housing industry in other parts of the country for those 20 years. She's highly regarded for her philosophy of putting residents first in everything that we do here at Columbia Housing. Mrs. Matthews will now provide today's overview. Mrs. Matthews.
Thank you, Cynthia. I also like to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening. First, allow me to do a sincere thank you for your interest in serving in this very important role, and that is being a partner with us in our Housing Choice Voucher program, becoming a landlord partner. I would like to give you a little bit of background information about Columbia Housing and the services that our city provides to our families in the city of Columbia and throughout Richland County. Columbia Housing has a $50 million a year annual operating budget that provides affordable housing to more than 16,000 residents in Richland County annually, thus making Columbia Housing the largest single provider of affordable housing in the state of South Carolina. We serve our 16,000 resident portfolio through the public housing program, the Housing Choice Voucher program, and we also have a portfolio of non-conventional affordable housing units. Columbia Housing has 1,600 public housing units, 4,500 Housing Choice Vouchers, and 400 non-conventional affordable units. Altogether, Columbia Housing provides affordable housing. We have 26 properties throughout Richland County, and those properties consist of a portfolio of multifamily, single-family, townhome style units. Every year, Columbia Housing pays out more than $30 million to landlords participating in the Housing Choice Voucher program, a substantial contribution to the local economy. In addition to those partnerships, we also have 1,000 landlords that we currently partner with, and we're certainly looking for more because we have the opportunity to provide more resources out in the community to provide more affordable housing units to our families. Columbia Housing has cultivated partnerships with over 180 plus community organizations, service providers, grassroots programs to provide wraparound services to residents whose needs exceeds those of affordable housing. So we do more than just brick and mortar. We try to address families who are looking to age in place, and certainly those who have various levels of self-sufficiency goals. Recently, Columbia Housing launched an aggressive redevelopment plan to reposition our entire portfolio. We have 1,600 public housing units, as I mentioned earlier, and a little over 400 non-conventional units. And so our redevelopment plan includes renovating all of our existing properties and building new communities. So you'll see a lot about us in the coming weeks about what we plan to do with all of those developments. We've partnered with over 7 national development firms who will start helping us reposition our assets to make sure that we address any deferred capital needs that we have and make sure that we create a quality product for our families throughout the community. That redevelopment plan is anticipated to produce over $600 million of economic infusion in the Midlands. All of you who are joining us tonight on the call, All of you who are joining us tonight on the call, we'll make sure that we get we've got your email address, so we'll make sure we communicate that information out to you guys, because you might be interested in parts of your business opportunities might lend yourself to any interest in that $600 million economic infusion that we plan to release in the Midlands. Also, to maximize Columbia Housing's role in affordable housing space in our communities, we are hoping to bring hundreds of new landlords under our partnership umbrella. And so we're so excited to have all of you here today to partner with us. We know that we have some existing landlords on the phone on our call tonight, and we know that we also have new landlords. So we are we're looking to partner with you to bring these affordable housing options to our families throughout the Midlands. So I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mrs. Matthews. I told you a few minutes ago about when Mrs. Matthews got here in 2019. Shortly after that, as she took over as a new leader at Columbia Housing, one of her first official moves was to reach down to Lafayette, Louisiana, to tap Yvonne Bean as Columbia Housing's new Chief Operating Officer. She brings to, in her new role, well, she's been here more than a year now, but she brings to that role more than 20 years of experience in the affordable housing industry, many in executive leadership. She is responsible for our day-to-day operations and oversight of the Columbia Housing's staff. Mrs. Bean will now talk about the importance of the Columbia Housing Landlord Partnership. Mrs. Bean.
Thank you, Cynthia. Again, as Mrs. Matthews indicated, we are super excited to see that over 200 potential partners were curious enough to sign up for today's virtual landlord workshop. I've been looking forward to today because landlords are essential partners in the Housing Choice Voucher program. In fact, the success of the Housing Choice Voucher program depends largely on landlord participation to make privately owned units available to voucher holders. Landlord participation not only determines how many units are available to Housing Choice Voucher participants, but also where units are located, how well the program achieves goals such as making units available in high opportunity neighborhoods and alleviating high concentrations of voucher holders in very low income neighborhoods. HUD research shows that there are over 12 million total landlords in the United States, and yet only a fraction of them participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program. Affordable rental housing is increasingly scarce in most communities, which undoubtedly poses a challenge to voucher holders. With over 3,200 families on our Housing Choice Voucher program waiting list, there is tremendous need for affordable housing in the city of Columbia and Richland County. As champions of affordable housing, it is our desire to nourish our relationships with landlords. We're committed to maintaining an open, responsive, and ongoing dialogue with all landlords. In fact, later in the program, we'll introduce our landlord liaison, who will serve as a point of contact for your questions and any concerns that might arise. We want you to know we value your contributions and greatly appreciate your partnership. At this time, I'm delighted to turn it over to our Vice President of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Ms. Candace Tollison. Ms. Candace has been in the industry for over 15 years and is Columbia Housing's Housing Choice Voucher Program expert. Ms. Candace.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bean. I've been looking forward to today's workshop. It's so exciting to participate in the recruitment and the selection process of the next group of the Columbia Housing Authority landlords. We are delighted to see so many people interested in coming together with us in this capacity. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a PowerPoint. So give me one moment to get my screen up and we'll get started. Are we going to continue the poll?
We're going to take the poll down now.
Okay. Again, my name is Candace Tollison, and I'm the Vice President for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The things we want to cover today is what is a housing authority, the role of the federal government, the basics of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the housing authority's responsibility, the participant or the tenant's responsibility, the landlord's responsibility. We're also going to cover the payment standards, rent reasonable and affordability, unit standards and HQS, which stands for housing quality standards. And we're also going to go over some landlord incentives. Very exciting stuff. So the first thing is, what is a housing authority? A housing authority is a local administrative agency for housing assistance programs funded by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. The federal government's key players is Congress, who creates legislation and they authorize the annual appropriations. And then there's HUD DC in Washington, where they write the regulations and they distribute those appropriations. And then there's HUD State, who monitors compliance and provides oversight and approves routine operations. The history of the key housing legislation in 1937, under that Housing Act, that's when it all began. It was created to provide subsidies to improve living conditions for low-income low-income families. And then in 1965, the Housing Act actually created HUD and expanded funding for existing federal housing programs, and also allowed for construction of community centers. And then in 1974, the Hcd Act is where Section 8 was actually created, because it was realized that we needed to partner with private landlords in order to open up more opportunities for these low-income families in our community. And then in 1998, the Quality Housing and Work Responsibility Act converted the Section 8 certificate program and the voucher program into one program. And it actually, under the Housing Choice Voucher program, it actually defines what the program is a little bit more than just Section 8. Section 8 was just a part of the legislation that it was created under. Housing Choice Voucher actually defines more of what the program is, and it's a housing choice for families. They're able to go anywhere in the community to find housing. Our jurisdiction is within the Richland County and Columbia City areas. So the basics of the Section 8 program is, again, in 1974 is when it was all created. It's to provide rental assistance where tenants pay up to 40% of their income toward the rent. And then the subsidy, the housing authority subsidizes the balance of the rent. Section 8 was fully converted to the Housing Choice Voucher program, as I mentioned, in 1998, and it provides families with a voucher to go out into the community to lease from a private owner. The voucher size is based on the number of household members, and an important thing to note is that a family can lease a unit that is actually larger than their voucher size, but their subsidy is going to be based on what they actually qualify for. So if I'm a family and I received a 3-bedroom voucher and I go out in the community and I find a 4-bedroom unit that's within my payment standard, I can do that. If I'm a family that was issued a 3-bedroom voucher and I go out in the community and I find a 2-bedroom unit that will work for my family, we're going to use the 2-bedroom payment standard. So it's always the lower of the two. And we'll get a lot more into the payment standards as we go through this presentation. Payment standards are basically set based on fair market rents, which is a study that is done by HUD and is published around October the 1st of every year. The PHA also inspects the units to make sure that they fall within the housing quality standards. And then we approve rents based on rent reasonable and affordability.
Ms. Candace, pardon
Yes.
my interruption. Could I get you to please put the presentation in slideshow mode?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Where is that?
Click on from the current slide.
Current slide. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, so there's the Housing Choice Voucher Program. There's actually 3 contracts that come into play. There's the Housing Authority's contract with the landlord, which is the HAP contract, also known as the Housing Assistance Payment Contract. And then the landlord and the tenant have a contract, which is the lease agreement. And then the participant in the program and the Housing Authority have a contract, which is the voucher. So the Housing Authority's responsibilities, or the major responsibilities of the Housing Authority, is to determine the initial and continued eligibility of the families, to correctly calculate the tenant rent and housing assistance payments, to certify that the units meet the federal housing quality standard guidelines, and take action when the units are not in compliance, and to pay housing assistance to landlords to enforce compliance with the housing assistance payment contract. We have to take action when participants violate their family obligations, and also administer the program in accordance with HUD regulations and Columbia housing policies. The family's responsibility are defined on their voucher, and their major responsibilities are to abide by the requirements of the lease, to pay their rent on time, not to damage the unit beyond normal wear and tear, to abide by the requirements of the voucher, to provide income and family information to Columbia Housing, and to report all changes in income within 30 days, to cooperate with the Housing Authority in inspections and reexaminations, and secure permission from the landlord and Columbia Housing before adding members. So they can't just add members to the household without first getting the approval from you, the landlord, and the Housing Authority. The landlord's major responsibilities is tenant selection and background screening. The Housing Authority does do criminal background screening on the tenants, on the participants. And we also check to see if they have been in federally funded housing before, to make sure that they were in compliance and in good standings. So the landlord's responsibility is going to be to do your regular screenings that you would for other tenants, whether it be credit checks or further criminal history checks or even landlord checks. The landlord also has a responsibility to stay in compliance with the housing assistance payment contract and to maintain units in accordance with the federal housing quality standard guidelines. You also have to collect your tenant's portion of the rent, enforce your lease, and take action when there are lease violations. And note that you cannot collect rent from the tenant for amounts that the Housing Authority owes. Now we're going to get into subsidy standards. Subsidy standards determine the voucher size and the number of bedrooms on which subsidy will be paid. And it's not the family's actual living arrangements. We're going to give it, generally, we're going to give 1 bedroom for each 2 persons in the household, except for persons of the opposite sex, other than head, co-head, life partners, and children under the age of 5. So if I'm a single mom and I have 2 children, and it's a boy that's 2 and a girl that's 3, I would be given a 2-bedroom voucher until one of those children reached the age of 5. We also give a bedroom for live-in aids, and a live-in aid would be something that we would approve as a reasonable accommodation for someone who is elderly or disabled that needs somebody to live with them in order to enjoy the opportunities of housing. Single parents with infants under the age of 2 will be allocated 1 bedroom. A pregnant individual with no other children will be allocated a 1 bedroom. Elderly or disabled single persons will be given a 1 bedroom, and then all other single persons are allocated a 0 bedroom. And then keep in mind, again, they can rent a unit other than the size that they qualify for. It's just the standard, the subsidy standard that we're going to use is going to be based on what they, on the lower of the 2. This is just the top portion of the voucher. I just wanted to bring this up so that I could show you When you're looking at a family's voucher, you can see what unit size they actually qualify for. In this example, you see that they qualify for a 3-bedroom unit. The voucher does have a date that it is issued and a date that it expires. And then there would be a date if there was any extensions given. Now to get into the payment standards, I mentioned earlier that fair market rents are published by HUD October the 1st of each year, and the Housing Authority must adopt a payment standard between 90 and 110% of the HUD fair market rent. Payment standards are gross rent. So the rent to own, so it's the rent to owner plus the utility allowance. And a utility allowance are countywide schedules based on the average consumption of an energy efficient household. We do contract a third party to come out and conduct these studies. And if it changes more than 10%, we do have to revise it every year. So you'll see here in this little chart that we've got the bedroom sizes listed across the top, and then the fair market rents and the payment standards. So what Columbia Housing has done is we have gone to that maximum that we are allowed under the regulations, and we are offering that 110% of the fair market rent. Now, a lot of people are going to always ask, so does that mean for a 2-bedroom, I can ask for $1,059? No, unless all of the utilities are included. And also keep in mind that you have to make sure that the unit is reasonable for the area that it's in. So I just want to give a little example here. For the 2-bedroom, if my utility allowance come up to $250, then I may only be able to approve that unit for $809 based on the information that we have here. The utility allowance of $250 would more likely include the tenant paying all of the utilities, water, sewer, and trash. The lower the utility allowance, for example, if the tenant's not responsible for paying water, sewer, and trash, let's say that utility allowance comes up to $150, then I would actually be able to approve $909 for that unit. So it's important to know that the tenant's utility responsibility does play a factor in what we're able to approve. And this just gives you an example of how we calculate a tenant's rent. We take the gross annual income, so it's all income from all sources, cash and non-cash. So it would include contributions, or it might include somebody's paying a car payment for me, or they're paying my electric bill every month. Those things are counted as income. We take out any HUD required deductions, and some of those deductions might be for childcare to enable an adult to work or go to school. It could be medical expenses for elderly or disabled family. We give deductions for minor children. We give deductions for elderly or disabled. So all of those deductions would come out, and we would get the adjusted annual income. We then divide that by 12. It gives us the monthly adjusted income, and then take 30% of that so that we can come up with the total tenant payment. In this example, the total tenant payment is $101. You'll notice that the utility allowance is more than that total tenant payment. So we're subtracting that utility allowance out. And in this example, the tenant's rent is actually going to be $0, meaning the Housing Authority is going to pay the full portion of the rent. And the tenant is actually going to get a utility reimbursement payment that's paid directly to them to help them with the cost of the utilities. The next thing I want to cover is Hap and affordability and how that is determined. So in this top example, the rent to the owner is requested at $700. The utility allowance come up to $247, and you notice that gross rent of $947 is higher than the payment standard. Okay, so the Hap to owner would be $700 and the rent to owner is $69. But what you have to keep in mind that each dollar over that payment standard is the tenant's responsibility. Now, I don't want you to confuse that. If the tenant didn't have any income, they're not going to be able to go over that payment standard because we do an affordability test to make sure that the unit's affordable. Somebody with no income, of course, is not going to be able to pay $69 in rent like you see in that first example. So let's assume that the tenant's monthly income is $337. 40% of that is $135. So the tenant payment required would be $170. Well, we could not approve that because it is over that 40% affordability in this case. So we would reach out to the landlord and we would negotiate to see if we could get you to reduce the rent to an affordable amount for that family. In this example, we would ask you to reduce the rent $35 so that we could house that family in your unit. A few helpful hints for renting. Just remember that rent is based on 3 criteria: whether it's reasonable for the area, whether it's affordable for the family, and the payment standards. So all 3 of those things are huge factors in us being able to approve a unit. The family can rent a different size unit, as I mentioned before. The payment standard will be the smaller of the voucher size or the unit size, whichever they select. And the utility allowance will also follow suit. It will be the smaller of the voucher size or the unit size. Rent increases must be requested 60 days prior to the effective date. So if you have a person whose lease is going to be up on March the 1st, and you want to renew with them and you want a rent increase, you do have to request that no later than the 1st of January in order for it to be approved with your lease renewal. You can use Social Serve to list your property. There's several others out there, but I do see that Social Serve seems to be the one that is used most in the Columbia area. And that is the website that we give our program participants for unit listings. You can list your property there for free. Just go to www.socialserve.com. The unit requirements in HQS. The federal goal for Housing Choice Voucher program is to provide safe, decent, and sanitary housing to affordable housing to low-income families. The Housing Quality Standards has 13 key aspects, and the HQS includes requirements for all housing types, including single and multifamily dwellings. Those key aspects are sanitary facilities, food preparation, space and security, thermal environment, illumination and electricity, structure and materials, interior air quality, water supply, lead-based paint, access, site and neighborhood, sanitary conditions, and smoke detectors. Columbia Housing has 3 primary types of inspections. The initial inspection, in order for a unit to be approved, it does have to go through inspections and it must pass. If you have a tenant, we always encourage the participants not to move into the unit until the inspection has passed. If they do move into the unit prior to the inspection passing and prior to being given the approval to move in, they are responsible for the full rent until that unit passes and they're given approval. The other type of inspection we have is a biennial inspection, where every unit under contract must pass an inspection at least biannually. We also have special inspections. These are inspections in response to complaints or required quality control inspections. So 5% of the inspections that we do are required to have a quality control inspection where an inspector other than the initial inspector would come out and look at that unit just to make sure that we are, that unit is in compliance. Under HQS enforcement, life and safety items must be completed with 24 hours from the date of inspection. This would include things like a smoke detector that didn't work or wasn't present. It would also include if the locks were busted on the house and somebody could access the house without using a key. Windows that are nailed shut would not allow the family to get out in case of emergency. So those things could be 24-hour fails. All other repairs would have to be completed within a 30-day period. If there's a failure to make the repair, it does result in an abatement, which is a prorated reduction of the daily rate of rent for the number of days the unit is not in compliance with HQS. If after the second inspection fails, the unit goes into abatement. If the repairs are not done 30 days after the abatement period, then the contract will terminate. The tenant would be issued a voucher to locate a new unit unless the failed items in the unit were the responsibility of the tenant. And just as a note, 25% of all units in Columbia Housing's program failed the first inspection. Requirements to be a landlord, it's really easy to get signed up. We are required to confirm that the housing assistance payment are issued to the legal owner or the legal representative of the owner. So the information that we're going to need prior to approval of a HAP contract is your state or federally issued photo ID, proof of ownership like a deed or a title, a copy of a management agreement if the property is managed by a third-party management company, a completed W-9 form, and an executed direct deposit authorization form. And now the really exciting part, the CARES Act and HCV program administrative fees have allowed us to do something very different that we haven't been able to do before. And we've come up with landlord incentives. So we want to make these incentives available to landlords who rent to voucher holders throughout the city of Columbia and Richland County. And they'll include leasing bonus, application costs, security deposit, utility assistance, and then we have a landlord liaison that is going to be your contact person within the housing authority. So no more guessing about which caseworker you need to contact. So here are a list of the incentives. The leasing bonus, Columbia Housing will award a private market landlord a one-time $1,500 incentive for each unit of housing newly leased to a Housing Choice Voucher program participant, or a one-time $1,000 incentive if participation was canceled prior to March 15th of 2020. Application costs. The Columbia Housing may pay up to $30 to landlords to cover any application fees, such as for a credit report. Security deposit. Columbia Housing will pay a landlord a security deposit up to 1 month's rent. Utility assistance would be Columbia Housing may provide a deposit of up to $100 for utility assistance. And then the landlord liaison. This was a newly created position within the housing authority because we understand the importance of having that contact person for the landlords. They will provide individual and direct customer service to all of our valued landlord partners. The purpose of these incentives is to encourage private market landlords with rental properties to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program, and also to expand affordable housing options for Housing Choice Voucher holders seeking affordable housing opportunities. The duration of this incentive is through June 30th of 2021. In conclusion, Columbia Housing acknowledges that the additional requirements for private market landlords to accept the Housing Choice Voucher participant can be a deterrent, so we're hoping that this will reduce some of those financial and process barriers, and will get you to sign up with the housing, the Columbia Housing, Columbia Housing, to provide housing for our participants. And our landlord liaison is Marcus Kennedy. You can reach him at mkennedy@columbiahousingsc.org. And his phone number is 803-331-2797. And that is the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I do think we're going to introduce Marcus also.
Thank you, Candace. Candace, is there any way you can remove those red markings from the presentation? It looks like our marker went a little crazy.
Yeah, that's not my marker. That's done outside. Somebody's outside doing that.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I wanted them to be able to see Marcus clearly.
Okay. Yeah, that's where somebody was on their screen during the
Okay.
presentation.
How about that? Well, okay. If Marcus is available, hey, Marcus, are you there? So if we have an opportunity to be able to speak to Marcus, and we'll bring Marcus to you, it would be really great for you all to have a visual of Marcus. I want to go ahead and get into some of these questions that you all are asking questions about. And Candace, thank you for that presentation. I'm going to just start with some of the questions that have been submitted. Many of the questions are similar, so you may hear your question asked in a different form. Candace, what bedroom sizes are needed most?
I think there's a real shortage in 1 and 2 bedroom. Well, really, we need them all, to be honest. But we do see a big shortage in the 1 bedrooms and then the larger units too. The 4 bedrooms, the 3 and 4 bedrooms are sometimes hard to come by as well.
Okay. Candace, people are wanting to know who's responsible for the maintenance on the Housing Choice Voucher units.
The responsibility for maintenance is on the owner, the landlord.
Okay. And does Columbia Housing provide any funds or any efforts toward maintenance?
No, that is the sole responsibility of the landlord to maintain the property.
How often is the unit inspected for housing quality standards?
It's inspected initially before a tenant moves in, and then it is inspected biannually afterwards.
And hey, guys, we have
Cynthia, I'm sorry,
Yes.
before
Yes.
you move on, I'm sorry. Before
Yes,
you move
ma'am.
on to the next question, I just wanted to add to something that Ms. Candace stated. She indicated that, of course, it's not the responsibility of Columbia Housing to inspect the units out of the normal inspection. I just wanted to take a moment and make certain that landlords understand that it is their responsibility to inspect their units. We encourage landlords to visit their properties every so often to just check in on their properties. And so I just wanted to just add that to what Ms. Candace just indicated.
Yes, ma'am. How about the payment standard changes? There's a lot of questions about rent increases. And there are a lot of questions about why the figures that people are seeing today are very different from figures that they normally see. And they're wondering about the calculation of our new administration with regards to what is paid in terms of a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, that kind of thing. Would you all like to respond to that?
Yeah, certainly. I'll take the first part of that question and then I'll turn the second part over to Candace to talk about the requesting a rent increase. So one of the things that Candace mentioned early in her presentation is that every year, typically around the month of October, HUD provides us with what is called fair market rents. So that gives us a baseline in terms of what type of rent structure we can establish for our voucher program. And so when I joined the agency in 2019, we had a rent structure that the Housing Authority was using that was at the bottom of the floor of what we can offer landlords. And so one of the things that the board did was they allowed us immediately to increase that rent structure to the maximum. And so we're right now have been operating at the maximum rent structure that we can operate here in our county. And we did that for a lot of reasons. One was because we were severely underutilizing our federal resources. And you guys know if we don't use those resources, we lose them. And secondly, we want to make sure that our families have the best opportunity as we can to be able to compete in the open market, to be able to lease one of the units that you guys have available. And so, and third, we know that you guys who are landlords, you're running a business too. And so it's super important that you're able to, when you're partnered with us, that it makes sense. That it makes sense and that it makes sense. So that it makes, dollars and cents. And so we want to make sure that you guys have the financial benefit to leasing a unit under the voucher program, and that our family has an opportunity to a nice, affordable place to stay. And so we intend on keeping that maximum rent schedule available. In October, it'll come out again. And so we'll increase it again when it comes out in October. Looking at statistically how the rents have been released in the Richland area, typically we see anywhere between a $25 to $75 a month increase per bedroom size. So as that information is made available to us from HUD, we'll be releasing it. And what we'll do too this year when that information comes out, we'll make sure that we e-blast that and keep that information out there in the public as well, so that you guys could be able to know when you wanna, or if you'd like to request a rent increase. So I'll turn over to Candace to talk about the requesting rent increases.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. To request a rent increase, you are required to give a 60-day notice, and the person has had to be in your unit for a minimum of 12 months. So as I mentioned earlier, if you had a lease that was ending on March the 1st, you would want to request that rent increase on January 1st so that you make sure that you meet that 60-day requirement. You're also required to give the tenant, your tenant, a notice of that increase. When we do the rent increase, we're going to look at the rent reasonable for the area. I mentioned that earlier. We do use social serve to get our comparable units. So yes, 60 days is the requirement.
And one of the questions is also, do we pay differently depending?
I'm sorry, Cynthia. I'm sorry, Cynthia, I didn't hear the question.
You may have
I think we lost her. Ms. Bean, you want to repeat the question? I think we lost her.
I didn't hear a question, but I am able to see some of the questions that are in the chat. So I'll be more than happy to ask a couple of those questions. One question is security deposit at the end of the lease. Is it given to the tenant or does it go to housing?
And that was based on the bonus part where they say they were going to pay the rent, pay the security deposit.
Yeah, that's part of the incentives. Ms. Bean?
So she's asking if that security deposit will go back to the tenant or if it actually goes to the landlord. So I'll be happy to answer that one. The security deposit is obviously designed to remove the potential barrier of a tenant not being able to move into your unit because they don't have the funds to be able to pay the security deposit. So that security deposit would, in fact, be presented by the Housing Authority, and it would remain the actual landlords at the conclusion of the lease agreement. The incentive is for you as a landlord. So you will, in fact, get to keep that incentive at the conclusion of that lease agreement. Another question is how is rent reasonableness determined? And you may have touched on this already. Did you have anything you want to add to it?
Yes, we look at the property's age and the amenities of other properties that are in a close locality. We typically go out around 5 miles, sometimes 10, to get those comparables. And we do use social serve as a system to get those.
Thank you. Will the slides be available later? Ms. Matthews?
Yes, the slides will be available. We will have this entire presentation that's recorded will be made available, and also the slides. We're going to release them on our website, and we will, all of you will get, once we release them, all of you will receive an email that will give you a link back to the website where you can access the slides, and also you can access this virtual recording as well. And we'll keep, we also have a YouTube channel that's connected to our website. And so we'll be uploading this presentation to our YouTube channel as well.
Thank you. Let's see. Next question. If a landlord hasn't renewed the lease, if the landlord doesn't renew the lease, can they still ask for a rent increase? So I'm interpreting that to mean for the next tenant, can they ask for a rent increase?
Yes, whenever you have a new tenant come in, you're going to put the proposed rent that you're asking for on the request for tenancy approval. At that point, we're going to check the affordability and the rent reasonableness of that. And if it is affordable and reasonable, we would honor that request.
What about for current tenants?
With current tenants, you have to request the rent increase within 60 days of the effective date. So if you wanted it to be effective if you had somebody that was going to be ready to renew on 3/1, you would need to request that rent increase on 1/1. They have to be in the unit for a minimum of a year before you can get a rent increase.
We're going to ask everybody to mute yourself if you're not speaking, please.
I'll ask this one last question and then I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Cynthia. If I have a complex under contract, could I have an inspector come out prior to closing if the current owner approves and is present, so we can learn what we need to do to make the apartments compliant with the program? It's a great question.
That is a great question.
That's something that we have done that we'll certainly be willing to do. That's a great idea. Yes, absolutely. Yes is the response. Yes.
we want your units. Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Cynthia, back over to you.
I also see, I'm going to ask this question and then answer it too. So I see a question. It says, I've not received my 1099. Have they been mailed? The 1099s have been mailed, but we know that mailing is, we are certainly having our issues nationwide with mail. We do have a landlord portal where individuals can access the landlord portal to pull their 1099. But if you did not, we're going to put Ms. Tollison's email address in the messaging, and so she'll be able to just email her, and she'll be able to get that information to you. She can certainly email you your 1099 as well. Okay, Ms. Hardy.
Yes, ma'am. Getting some hard ones over here. Here's one. It's great to see this type of outreach. However, what is the recourse for people who participate and the tenant leaves owing money?
One of the participants' family obligations is to pay rent, and that's taken very seriously. If a tenant is in violation of their family obligations, we could propose termination where they could lose their housing assistance.
I also want to say too, one of the things that we've done recently, and HUD has allowed us to do this, is anytime there is a reduction in household income, we have the ability to make those adjustments immediately, meaning that if the family loses, just say the family loses all of its household income through a layoff or a layoff from their job, then they notify us, we'll make that adjustment, and we will cover all of the rent that the family covered in the past. And so that way it'll make sure that you're being paid whole each month and that you're not missing out on any rent for the month. We've been trying to do a very good job at getting that information out to our families so that they know about it. And some of you, we've made a lot of adjustments with families' rent to make sure that you guys don't miss any monthly rent payments. But for some reason, if you've got a tenant and you know that they've lost their job or had some reduction in household income and they're struggling to pay their rent, please let them know to contact the Housing Authority immediately. We're actually even allowing families to call in and self-report it. They can report it over our website. And so we do it without any documentation. And that is one of the things that HUD has allowed us to do under the CARES Act. And so we want to make sure that you guys are aware of that as well.
Another tough one. Why does it take so long to get your payments? Why is it so hard to get in contact with caseworkers?
Columbia Housing does understand that it has been challenging, which is the reason why we've come up with the landlord liaison position, because we want you to have that single source, that one person that you can go to, and he can direct getting whatever it is that you need done, taken care of.
And the length of time, Candace, for the payments, I understand that a number of those payments are directly deposited into the banking accounts of landlords. And I don't know how it was done in previous administrations. I don't, but I understand that your policy and your department is to do the direct deposit into the landlord's accounts on uniform days of the month. In other words, if it's the 5th, then it's the 5th every month.
Yeah, we have until the 5th to do the initial check run that we, the first monthly check run that we do. And then we do another check run mid-month. So we are trying to keep there from being a large lag in time for you to get your initial payments under a new contract. The contract does allow us up to 60 days. We certainly don't want it to take 60 days. But during that time, your tenant would be paying their portion and we would pay retroactively back to the effective date of the contract. So we do, like I said, we don't, the majority of our contracts are done within a 30-day period, but we have had some that were pushed to the 60 days. And sometimes that's simply because we haven't received a lease so that we can execute the contract. Marcus is going to be very instrumental in helping us with that process.
Candace Shlomo Tajarstein, and I know I probably killed your name, Ms. Majarstein, but she says, I have to publicly say, I have dealt with Candace and she is an absolute pleasure to deal with. Thank you, Candace.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
There were a few other landlords on here too that are talking about what a wonderful experience that they've had over the years working through the program. Many people are asking the question, Candace, whose responsibility is the rate increase? Shouldn't rental increase be the responsibility of the housing authority? Because the prices you are posting are not the same numbers that you give to the owners. Part of what you said earlier, Candace, dealt with ways that the rent's calculated. Mrs. Matthews talked about the span between 80% to 110% in terms of what the payments could have been under previous administrations and how she's and the board have bumped it up. Do you want to say anything more about that? I don't want to paraphrase when you all can give specifics.
I'd like to say that, you know, this is, you know, my fourth or fifth housing authority that I've worked with and had the pleasure of serving families. And I will say what I've found in most cases is that we have landlords who've been landlords for a very, very long time. And they have, the housing authority really hadn't done a very good job at letting you know that you can increase your rent. And so because we've not done a very good job at that, then a lot of you have very, very, very low rents. Some of them are even half of what you could actually be charging. And so we like to just have this, and that's why this was so important for us as well, not only just to recruit new landlords, but also to let existing landlords know that you can increase your rents. And so we want to make sure that you know that. So I know that some of you will be going back and taking a look at some of your rents and seeing and looking at making those requests as Candace mentioned earlier. You want to do it 60 days before that lease agreement is up with the tenant.
Okay.
Can somebody ask, how do you request a renting? Like, who do you send that information to?
Yes.
Yes, you can send that to the landlord liaison, Mr. Marcus Kennedy.
And maybe we can put his email address up or put it in the, oh, there it is. Thank you, Ms. McRoberts. If a tenant is your property, Candace, beyond normal wear and tear, does Columbia Housing pay for repairs?
No, the Columbia Housing does not pay for the repairs, but that is a violation of their family obligations. So we would ask that you make us aware of that. And I think I did see, did we do move out inspections to assess those damages? That it has not been anything that we've done in the past. But certainly if you go to your unit and there are damages above normal wear and tear, we would ask that you let us know.
And Candace, did we answer that question? I know I had some technical problems earlier when people ask, is there a different rate that's paid from neighborhood to neighborhood?
Well, it does have to be reasonable for the area. So in one section of Richland County, we are a pretty big county, the rents may be lower in that area. And just to kind of follow up with a question that I saw come up, because somebody said they went on social serve and they saw that the rents for a particular area were very low. We don't use the listings themselves for our comparables. We actually sign in, we put in the amenities, and we look at comparable units in a more defined manner. So we're going to know, you know, if your house or your home has a garage, that's one of the amenities that we would list. If it has a washer and dryer included, if it has, you know, it includes the stove and refrigerator, those are all things that will be figured into those comparables. So what you're seeing there is what landlords have set their rent to be. That is, and we're looking for unassisted units because we want to make sure that the rents that are being charged are or market rents, you know, that we're looking at unassisted families.
There've been a couple of people to ask, do we just take houses in the city of Columbia?
Our area is actually all of Richland County.
Okay. And Candace, some people want to know, how do they get started? You know, they have a rental, they think it would be great, and they would like to get started. How do they get started? Who do they talk to? What are the steps involved?
Okay, that's a very good question. I would encourage them to reach out to Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy could get you the information that needs to be completed. You will have to provide a copy of your state or federal ID, proof of ownership, a management agreement if you have a third-party management company, a W-9, and a direct deposit form. So it's really fairly easy to become a landlord on the program. And then, of course, you want to list your property, because you want to find you know, that person out there that has a voucher that's interested.
Okay. Also, for people who used to be landlords but want to come back, how easy is it to do that?
It's very easy to do that as well. Just reach out to Mr. Kennedy or myself, and we'll be happy to guide you through that process. We would want to get updated information for you, from you, for your bank and your W-9 and the same information that you would provide if you were a brand new landlord.
Would being a landlord potentially impact someone's disability payments?
I'm
not sure.
I see,
Yeah,
I
that's not
see
a
Miss
question.
Cadena,
Miss
the tax
Davis?
expert on, yeah.
You guys, we do have Kadena Javis with us. I was waiting for the right segue. I think I just got it. Kadena is very, very well versed in a number of advantages, tax advantages that come along with being landlords and other kinds of things. That question, Kadena, had to do with one's disability payments and whether or not taking federal funds from the house, from Columbia Housing through HUD would put those disability payments in jeopardy.
With my experience with clients, we have hundreds that receive vouchers. And I mean, that's like their proof of their income. So no, it does not affect it at all. I mean,
If they're a landlord.
Oh, if they're a landlord. Oh, because of assets.
Right.
If they're a landlord and they have disability income, 9 times out of 10, there is more than just disability income. There's some other taxable income. I have never had, and not to say no one can't, but I have never dealt with someone who only had Social Security income that had a rental property. Unless it was something inherited that was paid for. And in that event, you know, there would not be a lien holder on that property. But 99% of the time, if I have someone that receives disability income, they also have retirement income from federal, state, or the private industry. They do not just have disability income, or there's a 2-income household.
Ms. Davis, can you talk to us about advantages of being a landlord and any tax shelters that might provide?
Yes, I was trying to answer some questions in the feed, and I do know the distress of how the tax rate in Richland County. It is 6% because you can only have 4% on your primary residence, and some people have tax bills that are higher than their mortgages. But as a business owner, your rental income is your business. It is a tax shelter. So you would need to do a budget and take into account that the taxes are this much. Your insurance is this much. The mortgage is this much if the mortgage is not paid for. And you need to make the deviations of the month add up to, and also where you can have profit for the event, you have to go in and make repairs, because as we all know, things do happen. Hot water heaters go out, HVACs go down. That's $5,000 to $7,000 bill. So you have to have, same way you budget your personal home, you need to budget with your rental properties. So all the income that you do receive from housing and or the tenant does not need to exceed the expenses for the property. Then you need to have a 30%, at least 30% buffer on that property in the event the hot water heater busts, the HVAC goes, electricity goes out, you know, you have to get an electrician over there. So the same way you have that personal budget and a 6-month cushion. Well, now that we've had the pandemic, we're teaching over a year now for a cushion on our personal budgets because of the pandemic. So the same way you treat your personal home and your budget at home, you need to treat your rental income. And there's a lot of expenses that come with having that rental income. The first main one is the depreciation schedule. Depreciation allows a big tax break in reducing your taxable liability, because if you have rental income, I'm sure that it's a tax shelter for you because you were looking for something to reduce your taxable liability. And the advertising that goes into putting it on the market. If it's out of the county or the city, if you have to drive 30 miles or more, you get to write off your gas. If you have to stay in a hotel overnight while you go look at the property the next day, lodging, you get to write that off. Any cleaning or maintenance, if you got to recarpet it, your insurance. There's the expense sheet, and I'll email it to Ms. Matthews so she can share it with everyone that's on the feed today, so that they'll know all the repairs, any supplies, utilities, because sometimes renters leave the utilities in their name and then they just have that cost carried on to the tenant. In the event that the tenant leaves, then they don't have to, you know, call the utility company, pay another deposit to put down, you know, for to turn the lights on or the water on. So some I've noticed some landlords are keeping the utilities in their name, so that's also a write-off. But those are just some major things. And like I say, especially military people, we live here in Columbia with Fort Jackson military base. They come here, they purchase a home, they're here 5 years, and then they leave. So they keep their home here, they go to other states, and if they have to fly in or even drive in, all of that is expensed for their Schedule E, in which that's where their rental income and expenses should go on their 1040.
You know, another question is, should they have to pay tax on the landlord bonus that they would receive from us and the security deposit that they also would receive from us?
No, that is not taxable. No, ma'am. Whatever Mrs. Matthews, the 1099, well, whatever the 1099 is issued from the housing authority, now that's the income that they have to claim. That's on the rents 1099 miscellaneous. So if they include that bonus in that 1099, you know, then again, your depreciation and all of your expenses, you have that write-off. So if that bonus is included in the 1099, then yes, they technically would have to pay. It would be taxable income. But again, if you're keeping up with your expenses that you have for your property, even the lawn, keeping your yard up, those are things that you can't write off on your personal property anymore due to the new Tax Cut Jobs Act of December of 2017. You put up a privacy fence, if you have to, you know, maintenance a pool that you have on your property. Those are things you still can write off on your rental property that you can't do on your personal.
Okay. And back to our executive team from Columbia Housing, there's a lot of goodwill out here, a lot of enthusiasm about participating with the Housing Choice Voucher program. There's a lot of indication, Mrs. Matthews, that people like what you're doing in terms of trying to get those rental payments up. But we do have a question from one concerned landlord, and she wants to know, do we give tenants basic instruction about property care? Because people are concerned about their property. And like smoke detectors, disposing of grease, or is that the landlord's responsibility? Also, things like trash, making sure that people know it's not cool to put trash outside, furniture outside of the home, you know, those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of questions that we're getting.
Go ahead, Candace.
Yeah, that would be the landlord's responsibility. I think I saw that they had, one of them had mentioned maybe putting that stuff in the lease. We do have some basic housekeeping that we go over, with the participants to let them know that they need to take care of the property, and make sure that they understand that damages above normal wear and tear, could essentially cause them to lose their voucher. But I haven't specifically said to them, don't pour grease down the drain or anything like that. So it's not anything that I have really included in the past, but is certainly something that can be mentioned. But I do think that essentially it is going to fall on the landlord.
There are questions also about getting into the landlord portal.
The landlord portal is actually hosted by the software company. On the landlord portal, there should be a contact us. When you go to contact us, you should be able to see a phone number or email address where you can put in a request. And I do have a instruction sheet that I can share with, that we can put on the website.
Candace, do we accept mobile homes?
Yes, we do accept mobile homes.
Okay. All right. And let's see. There's been a couple of questions about mentoring. There are a couple of people on the call who have a couple of properties but are a little unsure about moving forward and would like some mentoring from established landlords that are on the call. I just kind of want to throw that out there because there are a few people asking that question. Those people are listed in the chat if you want to respond to those inquiries about whether or not there is a mentoring program. There also was a question, interestingly, to our executive team. Have we thought about efforts to work with the county with regards to property tax rates on rental units?
Absolutely. That is, yes, we've certainly have that on as one of our legislative agenda items, is to work with the county on the property taxes, specifically for those units where we know that affordable families, where families who need affordable units are living. So to at least reduce the tax liability down to that which, would be equal to the percentage of those who actually own a home as their primary home. And so that is something that we are looking to really start to put some energy behind. But when we do, we certainly need landlords to help us, communicate that message as well, because we realize how super important it is to us and you guys as well. But we'll certainly keep you in the communication loop with that initiative.
Okay. Candace, earlier Mrs. Matthews mentioned that, I think it was Ms. Bean mentioned that there were 3,200 people on our Housing Choice Voucher waiting list. Mrs. Matthews mentioned that we know of 100 of our voucher holders that are having difficulty, finding landlords because the market is saturated right now with, eviction moratorium and a whole. There's a lot going on with housing stock in the area. So there are also questions about whether or not in that whole process, the role that we play at Columbia Housing, and if there are things that we can do to get that word out a little bit more. She had mentioned 100, but I have also understood that there are other resources that we can tap into. If we had more landlords, we might be able to give more vouchers, I guess is the long and short of that.
Yeah, right now, I'll take the first part of it. So we have the ability to house over 4,500 families. And we're currently only housing 3,700 families. And so that's where the gap is. And we really want, our goal is to house the maximum amount of families that we can house, which is 4,500. we know right now we've got a lot of families that are taking, that are having to utilize 60 to 70% of their household income towards rent. And so we've got 100 families on the streets right now looking for, a landlord who would accept the voucher. And before we just don't want to flood the market and set people up for failure when we really need to have a place for them to call home. And so the more landlord opportunities that we have, we can get those vouchers out into their hands so that they can lease those units.
There's also a question about, Ms. Candace, what if there are tenants who are struggling to pay rent now, but they're not on the program? Can they apply at this time, and what is the estimated time of approval?
Our waiting list is currently closed, so they would not be able to apply at this time. And we would not open our waiting list until we got to a point, until we worked through the 3,200 families that we have on there. With us having that many families on the waiting list, I wouldn't expect, I can't give a timeline, but I certainly would not expect to open the waiting list again for a couple years. There are other resources out there for those families that I could certainly forward to them.
If you have a unit and we happen to, and you have a family that's living in that unit and we happen to issue that family a voucher, and you know that that family now has a voucher and they notified you that they're looking for a place to stay, please encourage that family and let them know that they can lease in place. And so that's one of the things that we've been really encouraging families that, if you want to stay where you are, you want to make sure your kids stay in the same schools, you're closer to your job and so forth, your families, and you get a voucher, you don't have to move. You can lease in place if your landlord will accept the voucher. So we really encourage families to lease in place.
Guys, we're getting a couple of other comments from people who are a little frustrated. How can I get somebody to call me back from your end? I've called and left 5 voicemails and nobody calls me back. I have 10 units I want to give to you all, but nobody calls me back. Please advise. And so part of what we had mentioned earlier is that there are efforts underway to try to put some things in place on the inside, even in spite of the pandemic, to try to be more responsive, especially since we have a need. We're reaching out, people are responding to us. And so just wanting to reassure them that there's an effort underway to step that up so that that won't be their experience in the future. Do you want to respond to that, Candace?
I would just like to say too, that throughout the pandemic, we have had to stagger staff in the office. We have moved to a team approach, so hopefully you will see things improving. Whereas we have, instead of having one person that's familiar with the tenant's file, we have at least 3. And then I also mentioned, Marcus going into the new role as landlord liaison. So that is your direct contact. And if he needs to get somebody else involved, he will be that liaison. He will be that person that that'll be your one-stop shop, so to say. And when we do call back, sometimes we are working remotely, and we may be calling from a private number. So just keep that in mind as well. I found a lot of people when we do get in touch with them and we tell them that we have been trying to reach out to them, and it was a private number, they the first thing they say is, "No, I don't answer private numbers." So just keep that in mind if you placed a call into the Housing Authority. We've also set up, there's a call center that you can also call. All of those calls are directed to our customer service team. And then we also have COVID-19 at columbiahousingsc.org, which is a website. Which is an email address that was set up, and it goes directly to the Section 8 customer service reps. So hopefully if you use either the call center or the COVID-19 or contact Marcus directly, you should be getting responses back.
Cynthia,
probably should continue.
we have Marcus Kennedy on now. I'd just like for him to say a few words. I know, Marcus.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Marcus Kennedy. Landlord liaison. I've been with housing for almost 3 years now. And actually working with landlords have been the favorite part of my position as a caseworker. So I'm excited about taking on this new role, dealing with you all one-on-one, and this is the primary purpose of my job. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me or email me. My goal is to reach everyone in a timely fashion and to make sure that everyone is treated with a sense of urgency. So if you need anything, just let me know, and I'm here to help in any way. No question is pointless, just ask. If I don't know the answer, I'll make sure to get it for you.
Thank you, Marcus. Initially, for people who want to reach out to you, if you could just make sure your number is in the chat and your email address is in the chat, there's a lot of interest. I think that you're going to hear from a number of people. There's been a lot of conversation in the chat about wanting us to step it up a little bit in terms of being able to be responsive to people. But I got to tell you, there's also a very good spirit of cooperation within this chat as well. And we certainly do appreciate all of the interest, that we're seeing. And thank you.
Yeah, I want to, before you move on, I just want to say something. I really appreciate you guys being very transparent and open with us when you feel like we haven't, met the mark. And so we want to hear that feedback. We want to hear good feedback, but we also want to hear that feedback where we need to step it up as well. So thank you for letting us know. And we're really working very hard to try and and improve our services. And please know that your words are not going on deaf's ear. That we're gonna answer the call, and we're gonna continue to be transparent and provide the best customer service that we can to everybody.
I'm going to wrap it up with this last question, Ms. Matthews, Ms. Bean, and Ms. Tollison. People have a little bit of concern about why we have so many people on a waiting list. And so sometimes that's kind of tough to explain to people that there's only a finite number of units that are available, and the need is so big, but there's a fixed number of units available. And so I didn't know if one of you all wanted to address that as we get ready to close.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we have way more need than resources. And it has not just been that way, since the pandemic. The pandemic, I think, is certainly has pulled the Band-Aid off of things. But for those of us who work in this industry for many years, we have seen this time in and time out. And that's why we advocate as passionately as we can with our folk who represent us in Washington, D.C. The folk who represent us in Washington, D.C. are the people who make the decisions about what resources we get into our local community. We're the housing authority. Our official name is the housing authority of the city of Columbia, but we don't receive any money from the city of Columbia. We don't receive any money from the county of Columbia. From a county of Richland, we don't receive any money from the state of South Carolina. We get all of our money directly from the federal government. We have an annual contributions contract with the federal government. So when I talk to people, I'm talking to Tim Scott, I'm talking to Lindsey Graham, I'm talking to Clyburn. These are the people that I advocate with on a regular basis. I've been doing it for years. And we continue to advocate with those folks to say, we need for you to vote and support that HUD legislation to get us resources in our community, because Columbia Housing, we have thousands of people that we can't serve. We receive more phone calls on a daily basis and tell more people no than we do yes. And we have a lot of people that are in dire situations. And they are in dire situations because life has dealt them some difficult cards. They've a loss of income, pre-COVID or post-COVID. We have individuals who are aging in place, who are retiring with very limited resources, who can't afford to pay market rent. We have people who absolutely love their jobs downtown, making sure that the Vista and the 5 Points is the popping place to be on the weekends. And they're the places where our economic development folk come in and they take folk from out of town and say, you know, this is a wonderful place, and they're service sector folk who keep our community going. And so they just don't have the financial wherewithal to pay market rent. And so I just want you to know that we, the Housing Authority, not just the people that you see on the call, our Board of Commissioners, our staff, all 115 of us we are advocates for affordable housing. We all write legislative letters. We all have conversations with our elected officials that represent us in Washington, D.C. about the importance of continually providing resources to our community. And so that's why we have a long waiting list. And until we are able to get more resources, you know, we'll continue to have those long waiting lists. But I certainly appreciate you guys letting us know about that. If you want to help us advocate, please let me know. IMATHEWS at columbiahousingsc.org. Lee, can you put my email address in there? I am a huge advocate. I need for other folk to join me hand in hand to advocate for affordable housing, because we need you guys.
There are a number of questions left in the chat, Ms. Matthews, Ms. Bean, Ms. Tollison. I'm going to ask Ms. McRoberts if she will tell our guests today how we will handle that. Ms. McRoberts?
Yes, absolutely. We have received a lot of questions tonight. We got a lot of questions coming into tonight. Tomorrow, we will be compiling those into a written format, and we will release those with the video and the presentation in the next couple of days. I would think Wednesday at the very latest, and we'll have all those in a really clear, concise format for everyone to kind of look back over the information, because so much has been talked about tonight.
And Ms. McRoberts, the neat thing about Zoom is when we register, then you have the contact information that you need to be able to get everything out to everybody.
We do. We will be able to email everyone very easily from your registration information. So thank you for registering and joining us tonight.
Okay. And Marcus and Candace, is there anything, any last statement you want to make before I hand it back over to Ms. Bean and Ms. Matthews? Well, thank you all for a wonderful presentation. Ms. Matthews, Ms. Bean, thank you all as well. I'm turning it back over, and thank you for giving me the honor of helping out tonight.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you guys a lot. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight. We sincerely want to partner with you and provide more families with affordable housing in our community. I hope this workshop has been helpful. You know, don't forget to check your emails from us. We're going to be sending you some emails with the information that you requested during this meeting. Finally, I want to thank the Candace and the Housing Choice Voucher team for leading today's workshop. Special thanks to our communications team also for your efforts with today's workshop, and also special thanks to our Board of Commissioners for their support and everything that we do. I did recognize that we do have Commissioner Simmons who joined us tonight. Sorry if I've missed anybody else, but I want to thank Commissioner Simmons also for joining us on tonight's call. Thank you guys, and
Simmons.
have a good one.
No, I was just going to encourage all who are on the call, if you are not already subscribers, please, please, please subscribe to our website. It's where you can receive e-blasts from our organization for exciting opportunities like tonight's virtual landlord workshop. So please, please, please subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night.